Oh. Yeah, sure. She wants you there.
Me here? Oh, good. Okay. Cool.
Awesome. Let's give him a round of applause.
Hopefully this is on. Hello. Hello, everybody. It's exciting. Lots of lovely faces. Come in, everybody at the back. Come take a seat. If you haven't already. Have you guys got water? Are you all right? Excellent. So, there you go. Important to be lubricated, isn't it, really? Make sure we've all got some water. Hope you had a lovely lunch and enjoyed the comedy, I believe, as well. Yeah, seeing lots of nodding heads. Good stuff. Well, welcome to our fantastic panel about when is it safe to be you. So I'm going to throw it straight over to the stars of the show, really, to these guys, to give a quick introduction. Tell us who you are, what you do, and why this topic is important to you. I'm going to start with yourself. Liam, over to you.
Okay, no pressure. Hello, everybody. My name is Liam, and I work for the Boston Consulting Group as a case team assistant. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm transgender. Oh, didn't work? Okay, sorry, I'll just bother you with saying this all one more time. My name is Liam. I work for the Boston Consulting Group as a case team assistant, and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm transgender. And this is why this topic is very important to me, because it's the topic of my entire life.
I'm Sunil Jaswani. I work for Standard Chartered Bank. I'm executive director over there. I represent the G of LGBTQI+. And I'm here today because I've created some of my own acronyms, the 3 A's, which is awareness, acceptance, and of course, authenticity.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pierre. I'm one of the founders at MyGWA. So we are a business community for LGBT professionals, graduates, inclusive employers, and allies. So if you want to join, find a job with an inclusive employer, find a mentor, that's a good place to start. And I'm here because, as many of you, I was a graduate, and I couldn't be myself in the workplace. I hope that I will shed some light on how to be safe.
Hi, I'm Joseph Williams. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Clue. We are a kind of AI-based organization. We work with companies to identify skills gaps that they have to identify. The large part of what we do on a daily basis is helping people realize the value that they have in themselves. So this is a deeply personal but also professional topic that I've spent the best part of 20 years focusing on. Can you hear me?
Oh, no.
Oh, I thought that was quite good, so I'm not going to be able to repeat that. Joys of ADHD. Hi, I'm Joseph Williams. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Clue. We help companies identify their skills gaps, and so we spend the vast majority of our time speaking with individuals, helping them understand the value that they have, both from a professional but also a kind of personal life skills perspective. So this is a deeply personal and professional topic for me, and I'm looking forward to contributing today.
Thank you, panelists. Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you. And last of all, hello and welcome. And my name is Kate. I'm going to be your host for today. And what am I? I've been asking myself this question. I'm gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual. Do you know what I am? I don't like labels. I think this is the key thing to state here. But one label I do give myself is a storyteller. That's what I do. I tell my story and I help others, individuals and companies, brands, tell their story. And it's ironic, really, that we're talking about this topic about being authentic, because this is something that actually I used to teach. I used to say, it's all just be you. That's what it's about, just. As if it's a simple thing. And actually what we've come to find is it's actually can be quite difficult being authentic. So I guess this is where I'm going to hand back over to you guys to discuss authenticity. So, Liam, what does authenticity mean to you?
Yeah, that's a big word always, isn't it? For me, authenticity is that I can be my true self and that I can feel safe being that person as well. And yeah, wherever I am, actually.
And what is that true person?
Sorry, can you say again? What is that true?
You said being your true self.
Yeah, I mean, my
What
true
does that
self is that I was born in a female body, and it took a long time for me to understand that there was a little boy in there, and that's why I felt so strange all the time. Because like some people that spoke today already, I was one of those people that grew up without internet. So it wasn't so easy to, sort of say, I feel uncomfortable, and I don't know why, let's Google it. It really took years because I had nothing to reflect myself with. And so I just felt very, very weird, always like I was in the wrong country in my own body. And I just thought I was a total screw-up and not really able to live life. And I never really felt like I was myself. And I think when through a chance encounter with a book with transgender life stories in the 90s, I found that. And when I had that, I was like, oh my God, this is me. And I think since then, it's been a constant discovery of who I really am, but I'm definitely still the little boy or man inside this body, and by now I've been able to adjust the body so it looks more like me. And yeah, and now being authentic is really about being able to live as who I am fully and not having to apologize for it.
I love that. I still can't believe you were 3 or 4 when you knew that you were actually a man. I find that incredible.
Yeah, but like when I was 3 or 4, it was a very strange thing. Back then I knew I was a boy, but it was knowing without being aware of knowing. I just ran out all the time, and when somebody didn't know me, I just introduced myself as a boy and then ran around with the boys. And I remember my parents always thought this is a very strange daughter we were having here, and they thought it was a phase, and the phase just never went away. But childhood morphed into puberty, and then during puberty, everything was just, to me, I did not know where up and down was anymore. And I felt so lost. And then with 21, 22 years, by finding this book, I finally knew, but really consciously knew at that point what was going on and who I was.
A book as well. Imagine. We're so lucky that we have the internet and all the resources that we do these days, aren't we? That we forget. In those days, it was going to a library and getting a book and using all the resources you got. Hard to speak to anybody about it, so you've got to go out on your own. And I guess, Sonny, you had a similar, experience. It was a similar time.
Yeah, so obviously I was born in the 70s. You gave away my age now. I'm Kate. My story is actually kind of different, actually. I'm maybe not the best person to be sitting here talking about authenticity because of 40 out of 50 years in my life I was in the closet, and therefore I wasn't really authentic. And when I finally came out, or was actually forced out by my mother, and somehow in the LGBTQ world, many people say mothers always know, but they might not want to acknowledge it. She forced me out. On the same day, in fact, that I broke up with my first boyfriend ever, which I didn't tell her about. And then I went through the next 10 years, or the last 10 years of my life, trying to find myself. I started with a psychologist and a therapist, and I only learned 3 things in 3 years. One was there was nothing wrong with me, because I kept on asking her what was wrong with me. And that was after 40 years of knowing who I was. And by the way, I know everyone's story again is different, but mine is similar to yours in the fact that I knew I was gay when I was as far back as I can remember, when I was 3 or 4. And so she told me, 1, there's nothing wrong with me. Number 2, be happy with who you are, because I kept crying every time I'd say I was gay. And the third thing, still kind of have that little sound in my voice. And the third thing was, when I tell people to be happy and proud of who I was, and not to make excuses for who I was. So it took me 3 years to learn those 3 things, actually. And it was the best bit of advice, actually, that I got. Coming out of the closet has been quite difficult. I've basically firstly tried to tell everyone I was gay, but then of course you need to tell some people in a sensitive way. And the other thing I learned was around authenticity is that not everyone will want to be around you with your authenticity. So I lost a lot of people in my life as well, but good riddance really is what I would say.
Thank you for sharing. Very interesting, indeed. Ironic that you guys knew when you were like 3 or 4. I had no idea. Hit like a train. At the age of like my early 20s, it just came out of absolutely nowhere. And I'm still pretty sure my parents are hoping it's a phase. But you talked then about potentially losing people or actually being yourself. And Joseph, you had some interesting ideas that we were talking about before about do we have to always be our authentic selves?
So 2 things to this. Firstly, to the point on understanding from a young age, we formatively shape our instincts between the ages of 3 and 7, and they don't change. And so a lot of the dysphoria people feel when they're younger, or these instincts that we've like, okay, I always knew I was different. That's because that part of you is forming from that age. So anyone that says that you don't know is kind of just speaking to fable as opposed to fact there. But what is it that really defines authenticity, I think? There is such a pressure there is such a pressure with authenticity to disclose as opposed to feel. And often we have the right to that disclosure taken away from us by others. And this is something that we will continually navigate throughout our kind of working, throughout our professional, throughout our personal lives. And we have a lot more power in that kind of journey of self-awareness than we often feel, particularly when we're starting in new environments where we are redefining ourselves and what does our identity mean in that context. I often use the analogy of a diamond, which I quite like. Diamonds are multifaceted. They're not always every single side of it. You don't always see it every single time. But the way that you decide to show up in any environment in any given way is like showing a certain face of that diamond. So you're never compromising yourself through not disclosing, through choosing to not show up as every single part of you every single time. The choice is the most fundamental part, and maintaining that ability and making sure you're in environments where you have that choice is fundamental. It's one of the things that took me a bloody long time to realise. I mean, I spent the best part of 15 years choosing not to disclose certain parts about myself, whether that be my neurodiversity, whether that be my sexuality, whether that be my education, socioeconomic status. There's so much that we sacrifice for the benefit of others in the conversations around identity, around authenticity, and realizing that you actually control that a lot more than others do is such a foundational part of feeling that kind of psychological safety that is intrinsic in the journey to authenticity.
What happens when you don't make the choice that they want? When you make the choice and you decide that you don't want to be, today I don't want to be authentic. I don't want to tell everybody every day, because it's coming out is a continuous thing, isn't it?
Isn't it? I challenge that compromises your authenticity. If you are choosing to not disclose, that is you authentically making a decision as yourself at that moment in time that this isn't a time that I want to go through that journey. I mean, it's a continual cycle of trauma needing to disclose certain parts of yourselves in environments that might not be safe for you. You never know if someone is going to turn around to you and say something deeply homophobic, transphobic, biphobic when you come out. Even if you assume you're in a psychologically safe space, if you assume you're in an environment where that might be okay. I mean, you even get it in gay bars, you know. Kind of like, I don't think it compromises your authenticity. I think you have the right to choice. And we should focus more on that kind of journey of self-identity instead of this kind of omnipresent need to be all of you all the time.
Could I just add something, Joseph? One thing I learned, because again, I grew up in a certain era where actually we didn't have, as I think we all talked about earlier, the support groups and things, you know, it wasn't a spoken about thing. And so you tended to, and also D&I was not that prevalent. So you would get, as I grew up, consistently homophobic comments. And you remember who those people are because, of course, it hits a raw nerve with yourself. And when you actually evolve, as I've done, and come out of the closet, you never forget those people, actually. And today we're in a world of D&I where you can't say these things. And I'm actually torn a little bit about whether the D&I has been helpful or not in some respects, because it's good to know who actually has an issue, because actually you can educate them. And I think that's the most important thing. Otherwise, you can't necessarily. And the one issue that I always have is when people do make comments, I want to make sure that I educate them. And if they're not able to be educated, then so be it, you walk away. But I find that people are too scared to talk about the topic because they may say the wrong word and they may be deemed a homophobe or anti this or that or whatever. And one thing I want to do is encourage people to talk about this and not to just put it away or say, I'm not sure if I use the right word and whether I'll be called a homophobe. That's my job, is to educate as well. And I think that's just a point I wanted to make with regards to that.
And that's why you're here. Educating. And Pierre, this was what you do, right? This is your business. So tell me more about what you do in your business and how you are helping on this mission.
Yeah, well, now just to go back on authenticity, for me, I really think that's a very patronizing word because it makes people feel that if they're not authentic, they're not true or they lie.
100%.
And I think that we should really change the narrative around being authentic. I think if people have the choice to be themselves and if they want to volunteer the information, they should, if they want to. But that shouldn't be something that is forced onto them to do. And that's what at Magic Work we do. So we help companies educate their employees. So we do e-learning on allyship in the workplace, so people can self-test their knowledge around terminology, around, for example, people might think, should I say trans or transgender or transsexual, what's the right terminology? We do webinars where people talk about being safe. For example, we did one around Trans Remembrance Day 2 days ago. Yeah, and it's a long journey. But I also think that we can only educate people that want to be educated. I think when at the recruitment process, companies want to hire diverse talent, but what about homophobic talent? I think at the interview stage, people should actually assess, is the talent open-minded and wants to learn? Then they should hire them, and if they're not, I think they should be kept at the door.
So starting at grassroots.
Yeah.
And so from the interview stage, right?
Yeah.
Understanding if somebody is a right fit. Is that also a chance to educate them though at the interview stage as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I said, you can only educate people that want to be educated. Sometimes people might say my face goes against LGBT people. Doesn't.
Go on, Joseph. I feel like you're itching. So.
Well, no, it's not always our responsibility, right? It's role model fatigue is something that's incredibly prevalent amongst the kind of 2% of organizations that are actually kind of really diverse. And so it's fine if you know, like, Sunil, you do fantastic work. It's incredible to be in environments where you know you can constructively have that dialogue and it not be used against you. However, a lot of working environments aren't that. And so when choice is the imperative, right, Pierre? It's so important that we recognize that it's part of our right as individuals to not have to educate, to not have to do all this. We saw this massively with the fallout of Black Lives Matter. So many ethnically diverse employees absolutely exhausted from being kind of wheeled out as the ones that have to tell the story instead of people feeling the need that they need to go and do the work themselves. Yes. Like, if there are people meeting you halfway, beautiful. have the dialogue, show that you're interested, and then I will challenge you and teach you and put you right. But if you're not meeting me at halfway point, like, you aren't worthy of my time.
So
I would-
allies, right?
Yeah, to add on that, I think what we don't want to be is to be used. I can give you an example. So I was talking to a company for them to join the Magic Work platform, and I said to the lady what that was in DNI, actually one of my friends is working for you, and he said that it's a great company, and he's been out in the workplace since he joined your company. She went directly to find him, put him on social media for Pride Month, and I think that he was very using people and to put them on banners and stickers, rather than really actually asking people if they wanted to volunteer their information.
Yeah, it's true.
I would
Actually,
like to add a little something. Like sometimes people who don't want to be educated don't really know yet that they actually want to be educated.
A latent
That can
need.
help as well. So I think it's sometimes really important to just simply, be you and have that courage to be you, even when people then maybe treat you hostile, because sometimes that can change something. You're planting a little seed. I'm just thinking, an example popped into my head from my own life. I had a couple I was good friends with, and they were very Christian. And when I came out to them quite some years ago, they were like, "Oh my God, we want nothing to do with you. You are a mistake. You shouldn't even be on this planet," etc., etc. And I was like, "Whoa, okay. In that case, I think it's better we don't have contact anymore." And 10 years later, they wrote me a letter and apologized wholeheartedly and said, "We are so, so sorry we said that. Now we have made more experiences. We have met our other people. One of our nieces is also transgender. We understand better now. We are so sorry." And now we're super good friends again, and they've really evolved. So sometimes,
Well, how do you forgive offenders like this?
honestly, when I felt how sincere their apology was, I forgave him.
But
Yeah.
you were sowing a seed, right? So that's important.
Yeah.
So that you actually, just by you telling them and being brave enough, courageous enough to do that in the first instance, even though right then and there, but they hopefully felt bad and then went
Yeah.
and started to educate
I
themselves.
mean, I told them back then, "Sorry guys, but this is the way you're speaking with me now. This is unacceptable. I am
Yeah.
gonna call it,
Yeah.
let's not continue this friendship." But I think because I was so rough and told them, "No, not like this," then 10 years later they realized, "Oh my God, what did we do?" And then they came back to me. Sometimes, I'm sure there's many times when this never will happen, but I'm just saying not
But-
everybody will always remain so rigid.
I was going
in
to
their
say,
ways.
sometimes we're not, like, that's quite courageous of you to say that in the moment. I don't know if I'd have that same. I had a homophobic boss once who was telling me about his shameful lesbian aunt who'd brought shame on the whole family, and I was like, wanted to be like, I was like, "God, I'm never getting promoted. That's it. I can't come out of work. That's me done." And my friend was there who knew, and I needed him to step in and just ask a simple question and get my boss to actually acknowledge what he was saying and think about it. And sometimes you can have that cut through. And this is actually one of the workshops that I run, which is about being an active bystander rather than passive. What are the actions you can take?
But can I just say one thing? I think you've hit the nail on the head on one certain very important aspect about that friend. In the world of LGBTQI, I think we all recognize the need for allies. And it's hugely important, whether they're gay or they're straight, man, woman, black, white, doesn't really matter, transgender, bi, gay. Allies is what you need. Sometimes you need a voice. And I kind of learnt through the last 3 companies I've been at, I got outed at the first one, and then at the next one I went in and was just telling everyone I was gay, and it didn't kind of work really so well. And at the third one, I befriended a few people and asked them to out me, which was a much more easier way, because I wanted people to know, but I didn't feel I had to go and tell people. And I think the ally part is hugely important, and everyone in this room who's sitting over here could be an ally for someone. You don't need to have a badge or an official status to be an ally. An ally is a friend who's sitting there who can step in and can say something.
100%.
Come on, Pierre, I feel like you're itching to say something.
Yeah, no, because maybe because I went to law school and I believe in retributive justice, and I feel that it's not enough just to apologize, because now maybe you have the data on trans people committing suicide is much higher than other groups. I feel like, if these people don't have any punishment, ever. That's not fair for you or fair for society.
I also, one thing that you said in your story, Liam, that makes me concerned is that they had a transgender niece, and that's when the realization came, when they actually felt something themselves in their own family that they're to deal with.
I think that's often a problem, though, and that's why events like this are so important, and talking about all these things in general is important. Asking questions, being curious, like instead of talking behind each other's back, always sort of inquire, what do you need from me? What are your pronouns? Or because I think the problem was that, often people are they're not in any sense close to anyone. And I think if it doesn't touch your life, sometimes it's very difficult to understand. And now, with more and more people having the courage to out themselves, you're more likely to meet somebody. But 10, 20 years ago, that was maybe not the case. And then, I think it's always important that people can sort of relate in a more personal manner.
Yeah.
Joseph.
Please, Pierre. Far more interesting. Go on.
No,
Go on, Joseph. Tell us.
So the proximity, the power in proximity is such a powerful concept, either for you as an individual in finding your community or in others understanding what it's like to be you. I know someone else on the panel today has a story around proximity and the impact of it, and I think it's really important that you also, if you want to, mention how that transformation is so important in people's perception, because without proximity, it is just perception. It's not real.
Which story was this? Am I coming out? Oh, yeah.
If you want to.
Well, yeah, so she's talking about my mother. Take center stage. So my coming out story really was to my mother, to be honest, where she was very homophobic, like really homophobic. That's why it was never a thing for me. It was never on the cards to be anything but married to a guy and have a lovely family and the quintessentially thing that we're expected to do, right? Of course, black sheep over here throws a bombshell. And in a car park of all glamorous places, I decided that I needed to come out and tell my mother that actually the person she thought I was in a relationship with, which all the information she knew was right about Paul, and when he was in the car park and I told her that I needed to tell her something, and she initially thought I was dying, obviously. That was a go-to. That's it, you're dying. Bawling with her eyes out. I'd stopped her in her tracks, but I couldn't get it out. I was here, stuck, but eventually I managed to tell her that actually Paul was Paula, which even just confused her even more. So I think she cried even more, to be honest, at that point, until she realised that Paula's not the name of a man, but actually a woman, and that's what I was dating, actually. And after the 21 in Spanish Inquisition that I got, and the apparently making her feel emotionally battered, she now has actually come on a really beautiful journey with me. It was something that I had done to her initially. And then she's now actually, I think what that girlfriend that I introduced to her was probably one of the first people that she actually listened to. They had their own relationship separate to mine, and it was a really beautiful journey, and to the point now where she doesn't whisper lesbian anymore. Say those lesbians off doing their lesbian thing. Oh, makes my skin crawl. I think she's past that, thank goodness. But it's having something happen to you in your family, like you said, proximity, makes it a reality, doesn't it? It's a wake-up call. And I don't blame her. It was her education. It was what she was brought up with from her mother and father. And actually, I've had a few conversations with her. One of them, I did say to her, I said, Pam, I reckon back in your day, if you had the choice, do you reckon you'd be gay? And she went, yeah, I probably would, actually. So there you go. She's come full circle. Am I going to hand it back over to you to continue this?
Well, no, I just think,
well, first, thanks for always sharing that story. I love it. I think that
so much of the narrative surrounding authenticity, again going to the toxicity part, and I think it's important to kind of separate that when you're told to be authentic, it's often through the lens of like sunshine, rainbows and kumbaya circles, but there is so much intrinsic trauma that exists in LGBTQ communities, societally, socially, culturally, that mean that continual cycle of kind of showing up and being yourself and kind of being present in your fullest identity comes with a baggage, and it's really heavy, and it is traumatic. And so until the conversation becomes less about kind of showing up and more about choosing how you show up and when you like to show up, and us stopping kind of pretending that being your authentic self is this kind of like just guilt-free, shame-free existence, and embracing all of that side of the conversation as well, all we're doing is complementing to the trauma, because it's like, show up, but not that much, which is very problematic.
It is so true, 100%. And I think there's a great story here, if you don't mind sharing, Liam, about being, because I think this is underappreciated. Right? I just get up in the morning, I think a little bit about what I'm going to put on my body, but not too much in terms of my clothes, and, you know, chuck on some makeup, and that's it, I'm done. Like, whereas the thought that goes into being you, or has done in your journey, has been a lot, right? And you've got an amazing story where you were in an organization where they were joking, right? I'm not going to tell them. You tell them. It's a great story.
So we're talking about my experiences in Macau, right? That
Yeah,
you want
that's
me to
exactly
relate.
it.
Yeah.
In different cultures.
That was, I mean, over the years, I lived and worked in 11 different countries, and over the last 30 years, I divided my time between working as a stage manager for large-scale circus shows or working as support staff for management consulting companies. And what Kate is speaking about was I was working for, at that point, the largest show on earth in Macau, a big aquatic circus show. And I was so happy that I got that job, because at that point, there were only 60 people in the entire world who were actually able to do that job. And they picked me. It was amazing. But then when I arrived there, it was pure nightmare. On the one hand, I was in heaven because I was able to coach performers every day and work together with them, and they were lovely. But all my colleagues that were more on the technical side and backstage with me, that was not such an easy thing. And especially the department where I was working was made up with very intense alpha males. They all were ex-military. They had all worked on oil platforms before. So it was as male as you can possibly, and as testosterone, like, you know, filled as you can possibly imagine. And also the company, it's one of the largest entertainment corporations in the world, but they had absolutely no place for someone like me to go and ask for help. There was no ombudsperson, there was nobody in HR who was trained, nobody to talk to, really. And where I was with my colleagues in our locker room, especially, constant, really toxic, homophobic jokes, constant jokes about how they had laid another ladyboy somewhere. And then there was me and a company who refused to install shower curtains in the entire 5 years I worked there, so that there was no privacy. And for me, there was no way to, you know, get dressed and undressed without somehow hiding somewhere else. And I was totally burned out after, but I stuck it out for 5 years because I loved my job so very much, and I knew it was one of a kind, and if I would give that up, and I did give it up, and then I never got another job like that. And I still miss it, but still now, looking back, I think even working for something that you love so very much is not worth all that pain and losing yourself and constantly having to be afraid, and it's just not worth it.
I'm going to build on this. So, but also what he didn't tell you was that am I right by saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but so they thought it was really funny that they were drink driving and getting arrested, right? They thought this was funny. haha, we're going to get arrested, put in a cell for a night, which was, to Liam, petrifying. Can you imagine in a foreign country being put into a cell with actual criminals and potentially being strip searched, which obviously, if he was strip searched, goodness knows what would have happened. I fear.
Yeah, and plus it was a country where it's not okay to be transgender. So I had a car at the time, and sometimes I did drink a glass, but then I took all the little side roads I could find, and I was just in total panic each time, and so glad when I got home, and always telling myself, God, why did you drink? You know, but it was really hard because I was really afraid for my life, and my colleagues, they didn't realize that for me that would potentially end with either getting beaten up very badly, or maybe even getting beaten to death. And I think that's a thought, you know, like wherever I travel or where I work on the planet, there's just always this base anxiety, especially when I know I'm in a place where I, as a transgender person, I am not welcome, or where it's even illegal, then it makes you very nervous, and it makes you very anxious.
Not to mention, you're alone, there was no one to speak to, you're around alpha males, and they were like, things like no curtains on the showers, but expected to shower, these sorts of things. And these are the things that organizations, right, it's important that we lay those foundations, not just about interviewing, making sure the right people are coming to the organization and we're educating them, but actually it's the way that you make your employees feel, and it's creating those situations, making sure that they have all that they need to feel comfortable.
And a willingness to listen, you know, like, I mean, where I work now, it's a very normal thing for my line manager to walk up to me and say, hey, Liam, can we have a meeting? I think we're not doing good enough. Can you maybe give me some pointers? What can we do better for diversity and inclusion? Yeah. And I'm speechless because nobody has ever asked me that before. But that's how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. Go on, Joseph, you can say.
Yeah, I think, you know, pairing together so many of the stories, the resolute conclusion is that it's so important to like how you show up for yourself. Is it kind of fundamental to how you will ultimately end up feeling about your relationship with your identity and your authenticity at work. One of our theories that we work to kind of like 3 pillars of psychological safety. You've got your personal, so the way that you show up for yourself. You've got your relational, how you show up for others, and your professional, how you show up basically at work. Feels like to have work as one of those is quite massive, considering it is it's a relatively small sliver of the grander scheme of your life and identity. But most people, particularly those that go through university, particularly that go through business school, will feel such an intrinsic part of themselves attached to their professional identity. Now, the danger of that is when you're in a situation where you're compromised, when you're in a situation where your professional life is not showing up for you, you've basically not mitigating the risk of the impact that will have on you. So you need to have at least 2 of these pillars in watered, maintained, kind of intact at any one time in order to mitigate the risk of one of them becoming destabilized. And this is something that is not being taught. Your professional identity is the thing that will trip you up the most. If you are not nurturing the other 2 throughout this pivotal phase in your life, if you do have that moment where it becomes unstable, what do you fall back on? And that's the thing that I think has individually caught every one of us out. And that's the point where we realized actually showing up for yourself is far more important than showing up for others.
Sonal, I'm going to come to you on this. This is so relevant in the sense that, for 40 years you were dedicated to your work, right? That was your identity.
Joseph, as I said to you earlier, I relate to a lot of nearly all that you say. And thanks, Kate, for asking. I was so scared throughout my whole life. I've lived in fear. And finally, when I came out, my mother was the one that outed me because she felt it was important to. I thought that was it. It's now going to be all better. But it's a whole different set of challenges. And I'm not, one thing I want to be clear about is I don't want sympathy at all. I don't sit here for that. I think everyone has their challenges in life. And I'll share a small anecdote over here because when this all did happen, I had a bit of a train crash in my life. When I came out, I was out at work a few years later, and then I lost my job, and I drank a lot, and I got onto antidepressants, and I was a horrible human being, and I was, just none of my friends wanted to be around me, and it wasn't because I was gay, it was because I was just not a nice person. And a year later, when I finally pulled myself out of that, and it was very hard to do, I had a couple of close friends that helped me to say, this is not who you are. You know what, you're a successful person, you've done it before, you can do it again, show us. And I was like, you know what, you don't understand. And they go, you know what, they said, both of them said the same thing to me, and they had the same experience. They said, we lost a parent in that same period of time that you went through this. You tell me what's worse. And it's a hard one. It's a very hard one. I'm not saying that there's a right or a wrong answer, but you suddenly put it into perspective that you've got, you've got to also look around, and everyone has their issues at the same time. And sometimes you've got to put other people also above your own issues. And so for me, that was the support network that I had, was my friends actually just saying, you're normal, there's nothing, okay? You've got these issues, but we have our issues too. Get on with it now. Now is the time to just get on with it.
I love that, thank you. Pierre, do you have any appeal? I haven't heard from you for a while.
No, I think I thought it was sad that you would say that you don't want sympathy. I think that's what we're here for as well, to educate people. So I think we should be more empathetic with others and give sympathy when we hear stories like this. And you shouldn't apologize for your story.
Thank you.
Go on, Joseph.
I actually think, Sunil, you're incredibly brave.
Yeah.
100%. Very, very brave, and yeah,
Thank you, Liam.
super proud of you.
The thing is, we often excuse our trauma so much. Don't we? We spend, it's like that whole, like, I'm not doing this for sympathy. Like, whilst I completely understand where it comes from, because I gutturally reject someone feeling sorry for me. But yeah, I've been through, got to be careful not to use profanities, but like bad things have happened quite a lot, and a lot of them have anchored to my identity. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like I want you to feel bad for me, but recognize that it's not easy. Like, it's okay to welcome that. It's vulnerability is a huge part of authenticity, right? And like that is such a huge part of welcome. Like, if you want to take the role of educator, also allowing yourself to kind of take that vulnerability on the journey with you, because that's part of healing. That's such an important part, and you're doing it, which is awesome.
Look, guys, I've got to say thank you, because you've made me feel quite special, and I wasn't expecting that right now. Sometimes it's kind of cathartic to talk about these things, but I want to thank you all, because you've actually just lifted me up another level.
Amazing.
Community is therapy.
That is so true. Talking about your story, communicating, and yeah, having community, these are all massive themes that we've talked about a lot backstage and in the lead up to this, absolutely. And I just want to take this opportunity to say, like, we haven't even scratched the surface with these guys. They are all absolutely incredible individuals who have all faced massive challenges and adversity and turned them into really successful businesses, and they all are incredible people as well.
You absolutely as well. I mean, Kate's completely.
So thank you, Yourab, because I am very grateful for you bringing us all to stage. But I do want to take this next chunk of our time as giving it an opportunity over to you guys in the audience to see if you have any questions for our panelists.
First of all, thank you all for sharing your story. I think my question comes from, it comes to kind of Pride Month. Every company is bringing out the Pride flags, and, for the rest of the year, you ask the question, okay, where are they showing up? And a lot of people here, I guess, are kind of students looking for roles and looking for jobs within that. So when they're kind of speaking to potential companies, what advice would you give to them to kind of see behind the kind of curtain to make sure it's the right fit for them?
Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, for sure. For me, I would say you can go to mygework.com, so you can go to the company profile, you can check whose employees are listed there, you can talk to employees, you can find a mentor in the specific company, you can read reviews about the company, you can see which talks they did throughout the year, which articles or which campaigns they took part in. So that's, I guess, a good place to find information about inclusive employers.
One thing I would say is we're working a lot at Standard Chartered on the right the right words to use in interviews. And that is a big telling point, because we've realized that using the wrong language and the wrong words puts people off without subconsciously from an organization's perspective to that who's being interviewed. And this is really hard, I think you should know your gut feel, and I think for all of us we've gone through this in our life, your gut feel should be able to help you to answer that as well. Because if you're being interviewed, and of course it'll be on your CV somewhere, you want to make sure that you feel comfortable in that process. I always think an interview process is a two-way exchange of information. They're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them.
Yeah, very, very true. Do you want to build on this as well?
Just one thing on, looking up into the organisation and noticing superseding flags and cupcakes that there are actual senior people is important. But I think also speaking to the people that work for those senior people is important, because you can be LGBTQ and senior in an organisation, but also an absolute, I don't know the non-profane words to describe them, but you can not be a very nice person. There you go. So if the company is elevating bad people because of their representative characteristics, that's not a good place to work. You know that, period. What you should be focusing on is people that elevate people because they're good at their job and they show up well for their teams. Above all things Pride-related, Black History Month related, Diwali related, understanding that they're elevating people like you for the right reasons shows that that's the right place you should work.
Yeah, agreed.
I want to add, if you see somebody that interviews you, they're using pronouns, I think that's also a good way to say, actually, this person gets it. And I think every decent human being now should be using pronouns.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you're in the office building and you notice, like here, that there are gender-neutral toilets. That's a definite sign that there's something being done right here. There's a lot of signs.
And it starts at the start, like even pre-interview. It's like, who are they bringing to their table to make these decisions on the right questions to be asking? That's really important. Who are they getting at? Have they got a diverse panel of interviewers as well? Like all of these things at the very, very start is super important. What other questions do we have? We have 5 minutes, right? Yes.
Hey, what I like as founders, what are some things that you guys did at the early days to ensure a strong foundation for diversity and inclusion later on?
Just to make sure I'm clear on that, what are the early stage things?
What are the things you did in the early days of founding your companies that ensured strong inclusion later on?
Ooh.
Got that. Oh.
Yes.
Can I jump in? Because this, for me, is the golden ticket. Your operating principles, not just your policies, your operating principles as a business. It took us about 12 months to really nail it. But when we landed on transparency, accountability, clarity, accountability, transparency, trust, that had a much more intrinsic relationship with culture than any policy we put in place. And I think that kind of how we do business, not just what we kind of legally say we do, is the foundation. I think all of the advice you get around starting a business as well, like so much of it anchors to the skills and the idea, which to some degree is important, but how you show up to your work and how the people you employ, particularly those foundation kind of employees, how they show up is far more important than any technical skill that they will have. You can teach all of that.
Attitude. Yeah, I always talk about, I think there's a big difference between taking and receiving. And I just want to serve. Like, I would do my job for free. It's just I'm blessed that I get actually paid for it. And I think it's from the very first conversations is, how can I help you? What can I do for you? How can I serve you? And I think if you instill that in your culture, rather than this is what I charge, then you're always putting a good
100%.
foundation. Any others?
So your business is built on that principle, Pierre. It's like
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an LGBT business, so I guess it's easier for us to be inclusive. But still, I think we are at the point that sometimes we only had LGBT people. We said actually we need straight people in the company to balance it out, to bring new ideas, to bring some challenges to us. And we also realized at some point that we didn't have enough women. So now 80% of the directors are women.
Love that.
It also helped us.
Listen
And
to-
listening, right? You mentioned listening from the ground up as well. Like, if people are giving you feedback, don't just throw that in the bin. Like, do something about it. Say, hey, look, we've listened. Thank you for spending your time. I always talk about feedback being a gift. It is a gift. You could go on and people not give you feedback, and you're not going to develop or change or grow at all.
That's so important, because in taking it back to the authenticity identity thing, we can often, to the other end of kind of feeling kind of anchored to our identity and our authenticity, end up doubling down into it and restricting our own growth. And so it becomes so much about the identity that you actually limit your own potential, because you're not willing to adapt and develop your identity with, see, they thought that was funny. Yeah, with that kind of growth cycle that you would get if you were not, if you were just, everyone else in the working place.
Right, and we're constantly adapting and evolving. Like, we're just in our communication style, right? We've been in lockdown for 2 years. We had to move everything into our houses. That was change. Now we're in this hybrid, trying to figure stuff out. We are evolving as species, the way to communicate, the way that we do business, as people as well. Like I just said, I thought I was gay a minute ago, and now I'm not too sure. I don't know what's going on. I just that's it. We're constantly evolving and changing. Did you want to
I
add
would
something?
say, I mean, I didn't found the company, so I'm maybe not the right person, but I would say really it all is about the openness of communication. And when I'm in a company and I see, wow, I'm onboarding and there's already a diversity and inclusion session, there's people talking about their experiences, there's constant roundtables and interesting events taking place on all levels of diversity, that, I think that's the right way to go. It just needs to be an open conversation, and I think most important is that a company can make people feel that they can ask questions or they can really question things without there being any repercussions. They can feel safe coming in as who they are. And if who they are is changing, they can feel safe with that too. I think that's basically what I would say is the ground thing that needs to be there.
The one thing I would add, just a general thing for everyone, is I think the larger the company is, the more you're going to find that they're going to have very specific and tight policies around D&I, and whistleblowing is encouraged in these companies, and conduct is huge. I mean, at Standard Chartered, if a manager sees someone doing something inappropriate, if they don't report it, that's actually even worse than what that person did. Okay, so the larger the company, I think, and of course I don't want to stereotype or make any rule, the larger the company is, I think the more you will have a framework around support. And so that's just one thing to have a think about.
Definitely, network and support. One more last question, have we? Yeah. Go on, what's the final question? Nobody. Silence. I've got a lasting question for you. Okay. So we've talked a lot in general, full stop, that's it. Drop mic. We've talked a lot about choice, about authenticity, bring your whole self, should we, shouldn't we? We have talked about the importance of community and having your network and how you make people feel. But I guess, like these guys, thinking that lots of people, there's going to be a mixture in the audience of people who are students and working in businesses as well. But what would your advice be to them? So looking back on your journeys, what have you learnt? What is your biggest word of advice? I'm going to start with yourself, Joseph.
I thought I had it, but then I forgot it. I think the one thing that I look back on the most is the amount of time it took me to realize that a company was very lucky to have me as an employee. I was the fundamental reason of why they made money, and the contract was heavily imbalanced. At that point, I decided to leave the corporate world and I became a consultant. It was the best decision I ever made. And when I say a consultant, I don't mean like kind of big four managing consultant, I mean just like independent. Because I realized it wasn't the right environment for me. I realized that, you know, I'm super sensory, probably most of us sat the whole time like stroking this chair because I'm just massively overstimulated by everything. Like, the working world was not good for me. But it wasn't until I realized that I was worthy of finding out what that working pattern that was, you know, when I say working pattern, like my vibe, my lane, like until I realized that I was worthy of finding that and didn't need to conform, that's when I thrived. I mean, things are good.
You get to validate you.
Yeah,
Right?
be yourself to free yourself.
Love it, Pierre. What do you think?
So for me, I guess what I realized throughout the years that I was quite privileged to be a gay white man, and that I should be a better ally to other people within my own community. So for people of color, the LGBT, trans people, and I think we can all do a better job at being allies to each other.
Find your tribe.
Yes.
Love that. Sanil.
I'd say that I'm going to stick with my theme of earlier, and I think it's education. Don't make faces or call someone out for saying something wrong. Take it as an opportunity to educate, because each one of us have a job to do that over here. And what happens is, and what I've noticed is people are too scared when you actually ask them to talk about anything which is LGBT if they're not, and they don't have any experience of it around them. So educate people, and I think that's the most important thing, and you'll be respected for that.
I love that. Yes,
I would say absolute key, kindness. Be kind to yourself, first and foremost. Be kind to others. And if something doesn't feel right, walk away. I mean, there's most of the times not just the one company that can make your career happen, or the one thing that's going to somehow help you professionally to be who you are. If where you are is not right, then basically try to address it if you can, and if nothing changes, walk away and find something where you feel comfortable.
And also report it.
Yes.
I love it.
That is well best case. Yeah.
Wow.
What would yours be?
What would mine be? I think it's hard to be authentic, right? What is this word authenticity? So I just say, like, enjoy the ride, enjoy the now. It's hard to do, but it is an absolute journey. Live in the moment, because these moments are precious. That's why the present's called a gift. It's a gift, right? That's why it's called a present. So live in the moment, and what else? Like, you authenticate you, find your tribe, your network, educate at every opportunity, and be kind to yourself and others. Wow, and tell you what, if that isn't some good word of advice, I don't know what is. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you guys, panelists, you've been amazing, you're awesome. Thank you, you're out as well for having us and putting on this incredible conference.
Nice one.